Greetings. Welcome to Uncommon Pallor. My name's Mike, and I'm going to talk records with you for a while. It's my first attempt at doing anything like this. I realize it's kind of customary to do a formal introduction video, but I'm totally going to forego that. I mean, what little you need to know about me, you'll find out along the way, and I have a hard time believing that anybody really gives a shit about the catharsis I experienced the first time I heard the needle hit the grooves on a fucking Bay City Rollers record when I was 5 or whatever. So I guess all you really need to know for now is I buy records, and I've got a box full of stuff I picked up recently, and I decided to randomly pull a few out and discuss them here. So might as well just jump right into it with 7 inches. First on the docket being the Serial Mass Destruction record from Fragment. Came out this year on Suicide Records. Fragment is from Halifax, Nova Scotia, out on Canada's east coast. The corner here says 5 tracks raw punk, and that more than adequately sums it up. There is no shortage of feedback and distortion and echoing vocals and sparse lyrics here. It definitely falls under the D-beat umbrella, but on the raw end of that spectrum. You know, it fits in well with like Absolute and Wecco and, you know, maybe Physique. It actually kind of musically sounds like a heavier version of Physique. Vocally, it's it's akin to, Doom or one of the billions of other bands that emulate Doom, but there's more of an echo on it. It's totally driving and, guttural. There's a lot of this stuff out there right now, but the more I listen to this, the more it kind of sets itself away from the pack. It they throw in blast beats now and again for, just to mix it up. So I really like it. It's still making rounds in the distros, and I think Dave said Suicide still had some. So yeah, check it out if raw D-beat punk is your thing. Next up is the musical equivalent of a kid freaking the fuck out in a Walmart toy aisle. They're called Crisis Man from Santa Rosa, California. It's on Digital Regress. It's called The Myth of Moderation. I'd never heard of this band before. I just got it to pad out an order to Digital Regress. It came out last year, apparently. There's members of Ceremony and Autistic Youth and Acrylics in this. I can totally hear the acrylics in the guitar, although it doesn't sound like acrylics. It's more of a trebly, mid-paced, stomping kind of punk. It's the guitar playing is kind of angular and strange, like maybe like some of those Northwest Indiana bands of late. The vocalist is super snotty sounding, and he's very he just seems very spontaneous. He's doing like weird barks and yowls and stuff while it just goes around. So it's got a really stomping quality to it, and it's just repetitive at times, but it works. So yeah, I was kind of surprised by this because I'd never ever heard of them before. So I'll definitely be on the lookout for more of their stuff. So yeah, Crisis Man, Myth of Moderation. Next up, I'm gonna go to my local scene from London, Ontario. It's the new record from Mononegatives, Sure Shock. It was released by No Front Teeth from the UK. It's a 3-piece band, like I said, from London, Ontario. I've known these guys, all of them, for quite a while. They've played in many bands, Dyslexic, Dong Vegan, Clazo, Bike Cop, The Syndrome, on and on and on. This one's a little bit different, though, from their normal fare. This sounds kind of like Devo with 77 punk vocals, which sounds weird, but it actually works. It leans occasionally into power pop, but any of the sweetness that, power pop normally conveys is basically killed off by the production. It sounds like it was produced in a tunnel filled with crackling electricity. It would appeal to, hardcore fans, regular punk fans, garage punk fans. I think it's got some wide appeal anyways. So I've never seen them live. I always intend to, and then something always happens. Back when we were allowed to go to shows. So hopefully once this apocalypse dies down, I'll be able to finally go check them out. So yeah, Mononegatives, pick it up. Next is a solo project from Greg Wilkinson, who you'd know from Brain Oil and Lana de Gallus and Graves at Sea and whatever. And he produces a bunch of stuff too. It's the Shrinkwrap Killers, stolen electronics to shove up your ass, which is regular Sunday at my place. This is the third of the Systemic Surgery series that Iron Lung Records is doing. The first being Clarko and the second being Homeless Cadaver. This, if you like the Spits, you're gonna fucking love this. It sounds a lot like the Spits, but it has kind of a spooky element to it, kind of like maybe the Hex Dispensers jumped in there or something, kind of a gothy weirdness to it. It's just like, plodding new wave that the vocalist sounds heavily sedated. It's very good. So yeah, I was pretty stoked to actually get this. I just ordered their demo and got it, but I haven't listened to it yet. But yeah, that just came out this year, and I highly recommend getting it. A bit of a change of pace here. From Singapore, Doldrey. I got their 12-inch on Iron Lung a while back. Then I saw that this was available. It's been repressed. It was originally a cassette on Caligari, released in 2018. But this year it was a split release by Goat Lord, which apparently is Goat Lord with a lisp, and Glord Records. Like I said, they're from Singapore. I know some of the members play in another band called Zod. I have their LP. It's more of a punk thing, though. The drumming, definitely not fancy, like any kind of fancy death metal. Like, this is complete death metal. It's just the drumming is, especially the bass drum, it just stomps all the way through it. There's no real finesse to it. The vocals are cavernous. Sounds like they were recorded in a fucking grain silo. I'm totally into that, so yeah. But I don't know. I haven't seen this in too many places, but I don't know how widely available it is. But if you get a chance, pick it up, especially if you like kind of primitive sounding death metal. It's good. I got 3 7-inches left here, and I'll preface this. They're all on a label called Legion of Death, which is from France. It's run by a guy named Shaxul that plays in a band called Manzer. They release records by bands from like wacky locales, and that's kind of something that's always appealed to me, ever since I got into punk and metal and whatnot. There's a punk label. Well, there's actually a couple. There's like Tiananmen 89 and Darbuka Records, and they release, exclusively release punk records from weird, out of the way, unexpected locales. So I discovered Legion of Death Records that does this with metal. So I've kind of decided to try and get the entire Legion of Death catalog, and I'm down to, I need about maybe 7 or 8 more, but they're all the kind of pricey ones that I'm not sure that I want to, pay that much for right now. But anyways, I got a couple just last week from a guy in Japan that I bought. This one's from 2003. It's Cruelty, Marching in Blood. It's a Brazilian band. This was recorded live in 1986. It's kind of like pre-death metal. Like, it's, similar to like, Toronto's Slaughter or whatever. But I mean, the live recording's all right. It's nothing, it's nothing groundbreaking or whatever. But like I said, I'm trying to get the entire label's discography, so this one needed to go in there. But it's definitely better than some of the stuff they've put out, because they put out some ridiculously bad shit. So yeah. And then in that same order, from the guy from Japan, I got Black Angel, Art and Fire. I have another record. I think it's a split with Black Angel and somebody. They're originally from Peru, but they moved to Brazil. It's black metal, definitely black metal, and black metal is not my area of expertise. I have a kind of a passing interest in it. I tend to like the stuff that's from third world countries and stuff like that, because it just sounds raw and disgusting. This is, just pretty relentless black metal, and then it just kicks into just, old school death metal. It's like just a total mix of the two. So, I don't know. It's good for what it is. It's certainly better than a lot of stuff I've heard, but, I'm sure, any super fan of black metals, this isn't going to be the first thing they reach for, and I don't even know who to compare them to, and I'm not going to try, because I don't want to, have war waged on me by some fucking crazy edgelords or some shit. So, anyways. And the third Legion of Death record, and the last 7-inch I'm going to talk about, is Pheretrum. Yeah, Pheretrum, Inward Lunacy. This band is from Uruguay, and you would expect death metal by the cover, but it actually is kind of more like a crossover band with death metal influences. And it's it's got some pretty crazy vocals. Like sometimes he sounds like a dog barking in the middle of a fucking train derailment, but then at other times he sounds like Chuck Schuldiner. So I don't know. It's kind of confusing. It's not bad. It's not something I'd listen to a fucking ton or anything, but it's one of the newer ones. It was from last year. So yeah, still happy to have it. It's just kind of an odd, weird record from kind of an unusual place. So now we'll jump into 12-inch records, and I'll be out of your hair soon. First is a band from the Basque region of France. They're called Hondartzako, Hondakinak, and I've probably mispronounced that. The LP's called Bruiarta. I first heard these guys on the Welcome to 2013 comp, and I was like, that's pretty fucking good. Then I saw they had a 7-inch out. I picked that up, and I was like, this is pretty fucking good. And then I didn't hear from them for a long time, and then they just came out with this LP late last year, and I picked it up, and this is pretty fucking good. It's driving, loud, just no nonsense hardcore. It kind of reminds me of something like Skit Kids, maybe, if they had a big influence of like 80s Spanish and or Italian hardcore. They just power their way through shit, and then they'll just suddenly drop into a breakdown it seems to go on longer than it should. Usually that kind of annoys me, but in this case, just it kind of lulls you, and you're just kind of like, oh yeah, that's pretty good, and then they just bust back into like loud, fast, and crazy. So I don't know. Most people that I know that have heard these guys fucking love them. So pick it up and be one of those people. It's on. It's a split release between Destructure and Solar Funeral. So yeah, get it. Next up, Muro, Pacificar LP. It's on Beach Impediment. This is a fucking groundbreaker. Came out this year. They played Not Dead Yet Festival in Toronto a couple years ago. I saw them a few times there. I saw them twice there, I think. And then later they ended up coming back, and they were going to do an American tour and then some dates in Canada, but they ended up not being allowed to go to America. So we here in Ontario were lucky enough to, get to see them a bunch. So I saw them like another 3 times here. So, I'm kind of spoiled in that respect because every time they fucking killed it. They sound like they just jumped right out of, the Welcome to 1984 comp or the Peace comp or something. They're from Bogota, Colombia. You always hear this stuff about, certain punk bands being just so incredibly passionate about stuff and whatever. And this is that band. Super passionate, very political. You can tell they care. They constantly tour. They're just, they're fucking great. Every time I've seen them, they just put their all into it. It sounds like what you would expect from, South American hardcore in the 80s, it sounds very authentically old, but I don't think that that's their intention really, maybe, but that's what it sounds like, and it's fucking great, If there's one record you pick up this year, if you're into like just hardcore punk, that's probably it. Switch gears a bit, jump into some grindcore. Now, if I'm going to listen to grindcore, I like the stuff that's influenced by early Napalm Death, like the more death metal grindcore. It's not to say I don't appreciate the kind of more ramshackle, playing drums on pots and pans and colanders grindcore, but I prefer the death metal stuff a little better. So this one's kind of been getting some attention lately. It's Internal Rot, Grieving Birth. It's on Iron Lung Records. It is Australian. It's the drummer in this band. He's been in like Agents of Abhorrence and Faceless Burial, and he was in a hardcore band called Far Left Limit. He's fucking great. But this, it sounds like early Napalm Death or, maybe like Insect Warfare, although it doesn't use the high register vocals like Insect Warfare does. It's pretty much exclusively the lower register. And there's some bits that kind of remind me of Discordance Axis, but not quite so like spacey. I don't know. I can see where the attention is coming from, because this is a fucking great record. But, I'd be interested in checking out more of their stuff. I know they have other stuff available. I just never heard them before. So totally worthwhile record if you're into like polished grindcore. That's your shit. Toronto death metal. It's the Primordial Malignity record by Tomb Mold. Just reissued. It's one of the few things by them I didn't have, so I ordered it from Blood Harvest. These guys are pretty well known at this point. They're just a really solid death metal band. Great riffs, fucking just brutal. I've seen them live a bunch of times. They're fucking great every single time. I think they're deserving of the attention they get, but a lot of people seem to have a problem with them. I'm not exactly sure why. I think maybe it's because they kind of came from a punk background, and it's like, how dare you infiltrate our death metal scene or whatever. But I could be wrong. Whatever. Who cares? Thing is they're good. Leave them the fuck alone. Let them play. And then a complete fucking about face. Last year's release on Puke and Vomit Records. It's the Versus 12-inch. Now, I'd heard their single a long time ago. They're from San Francisco. The story is that Olga DeVolga, who played in The Lewd, moved back to San Francisco from Seattle and started this band up. Got the drummer, Jane Weems, was in the Maggots, which was well known in the Killed by Death circles, for their single Let's Get Tammy Wynette. Somebody else in this band was in Gun Club, so I guess it was a pretty good pedigree for that time. It's like new wave influence punk. The single has kind of a sense of urgency, and it's really amateurish, but that doesn't kill it. It actually kind of gives it a bit of a charm to it. It's like, I like it quite a bit. The A side is the single, and then the B side has their 1978 demo, which I had never heard before, but it still stacks up. It's consistent. Kind of a strange, band that didn't get any attention back then, I'm sure, but got some from me now because I jumped on it as soon as I saw it. So thanks, Puke and Vomit, for reissuing that shit. Here's one I will talk like not even hardly at all about, but it's a Frontier Records reissue of the Adolescents self-titled. Surprisingly enough, I have never owned this record. I've had people record it for me, and I've had tapes with it, and I've got sound files of it or whatever, but I've never actually owned it, and I don't know why, because it's a fucking great record. So this is on Frontier Records. It was originally released in 1981 on Frontier Records. I think this is a reissue that's a couple years old or whatever. But I'm glad to actually have it, because almost every song on this is great. Like I Hate Children, Word Attack, Wrecking Crew, Kids of the Black Hole, Amoeba. They're all fucking great. It's just, if you think about 80s, California beach punk rock, Adolescents, 100%. All right, and lastly, this is kind of a grail, when I was in early high school, we hung around this girl. She had these like hippie parents, and I was into punk, but I was mostly into like British punk, GBH and shit like that. And this girl let me a tape that her dad had picked up somewhere, and it had like there was some bands on it that I had heard, like the Misfits and the Freeze and whatever, and Angry Samoans, but it also had some ones that I'd never heard of. And there was a song on it called Dr. Cutthroat's Revenge by a band called Junior Achievement. And I heard it then. I gave the tape back to him. I didn't even record it for myself, and I've never heard it since until I discovered that it was on YouTube and I listened to it. So, and that was, like 1986 or some shit. So, so I finally got around to getting this record. So it's Fade to Black by Junior Achievement. They're just a completely overlooked punk band from somewhere in Arizona. It's on X Sonic Records. If you're gonna give it like a real simplified, comparison for sound, I would say maybe mix, something like the Adolescents with TSOL. But if you want to dig a little deeper, I would say it's got a heavy Tales of Terror influence. Like there's kind of a death rock thing going on to it. It's very good though. It's just very obscure. I'm really glad I got a copy. I finally found one that was, affordable to my liking, so I picked it up. So that's probably the most, the biggest pickup that I've got in a while that, makes a difference to me personally. So anyways, that's it for me. Sorry if I was a little stiff, but I'm sure I'll get better at this. I hope y'all are staying uncovided. So whatever. Till next time. Cheers.